إنه الخلق العظيم المجتبى وهو مشكاة الفضيلة والمعين لليتامى والنساء والضعفاء رفقه بل للخلائق أجمعين للطيور ووكرها وصغارها للحياة.
We give our praise and all thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the favors and bounties Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed on us. And we send salat and salam on his last and final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshallah, from tonight we'll start Suratul Baqarah. Mostly we'll just do some of the virtues and merits of Suratul Baqarah, and most likely from next week we'll actually start Suratul Baqarah. So tonight mostly we'll do the hadith that deals with the virtues and the blessings of Suratul Baqarah, and next week we'll start from the first ayat, which is Alif Lam Mim. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has mentioned from Ma'qal bin Yasar that Al-Baqarah Sanamul Quran. The Surah Al-Baqarah is known as the Sanamul Quran. Sana means the peak of the Quran, the highest point of the Quran. Then he says, Nazala ma kullu ayatin minha samanuna malikan. Says that each ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah, when these ayat was revealed from Surah Al-Baqarah, each ayat that was descending and was coming down to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was accompanied by 80 angels. So each one of the ayats, every time an ayat of Surah Baqarah was coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is accompanied by 80 angels. Then he says, وَاسْتَخْرَجَتْ اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْحَيِّ الْقَيُّومُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken out the Ayatul Kursi, Allahu la ilaha illa hayyul qayyum, min taht al-arsh, from under the arsh of Allah, from under the throne of Allah. So you have Surah Al-Baqarah. In Surah Al-Baqarah, this is the best of all ayats, which is Ayatul Kursi, that was taken out from under the arsh. Then it says, فَوَصَلْتُ بِهَا, you should be attached to Ayatul Kursi. You should learn Ayatul Kursi, you should know Ayatul Kursi, you should be reciting Ayatul Kursi. فَوَصَلْتُ بِسُورَةِ الْبَقَرَةِ, as well as we should, just as how you are so attached to Ayatul Kursi, you should as well be attached to Suratul Baqarah as well. Then he mentions about Surah Yasin. He says, وَيَاسِينَ قَلْبُ الْقُرْآنِ. As we mentioned when we were doing the Tafseer of Yasin, says Yasin is the heart of the Quran, and no individual will recite Surah Yasin intending for the pleasure of Allah in the hereafter except Allah forgives him his sin. And then Rasulullah advised us, وَقْرَؤُوهَا عَلَى مَوْتَاكُمْ. Recite Surah Yasin on your deceased. This was about Surah Yasin. In another hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, says Rasulullah says, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَنَامٌ. Says for everything there's a sanam, there's a peak. As you mentioned in the first hadith, that Surah Al-Baqarah is the peak, is the highest point. In this hadith now, Rasulullah says, everything has a peak. Means everything that you think about, there's always the lowest point and there's always the highest point. If you have a house, you have the base, you have the floor, then you have the roof. The roof will be the peak, the highest point. You have an animal, the foot will be the lowest. The head or the back will be the highest. Like that, every single thing, the trees, the mountains, everything has the lowest point, and then you have the highest point, the peak. So he's saying Surah Al-Baqarah is known as the peak or the highest point in the Quran. And the reason for that is because Surah Al-Baqarah, it is actually the second surah of the Quran. When we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, even though it is a surah, it is not considered to be the beginning of the first para. The first para is known as Alif Lam Mim para, not Alhamdu para. They have Surah Fatiha because Surah Fatiha is actually like a supplication, like an opening phrase, just to open the Quran. And the actual Quran is starting from Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fi. So that's why it means that this is the highest of the Quran because this is the beginning of the Quran. Surah Nas is the lowest point and Surah Al-Baqarah is the highest point. As well as the amount of things that is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. The kind of content that is in Surah Al-Baqarah, it is like an opening with all the rules and regulations that are laid down in Surah Al-Baqarah. So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ sanam. For everything there's a sanam. For everything there's a highest point, there's a peak. And he says, وَإِنَّ السَّنَامَ الْقُرْآنِ سُورَةُ الْبَقَرَةِ. Well, the highest peak of the Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah. And he says, وَفِيَ آيَةٌ. And in Surah Al-Baqarah there's an ayat. هِيَ سَيِّدَةُ آيَةٌ. And it is the Sayyida, this ayat is known as the leaders of all the ayats. The master of all the ayats. And that is Ayatul Kursi, which we will do while going through Surah Baqarah. We will do Ayatul Kursi as well. Another hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that Anna Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam called, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا تجعلوا بيوتكم قبورا. Do not make your homes graveyard. It says, لا تجعلوا بيوتكم قبورا. Do not make your homes into graveyards. Then it says, فَإِنَّ الْبَيْتَ الَّذِي تَقْرَأُ فِيهِ سُورَةُ الْبَقَرَةِ. Verily that house which Suratul Baqarah is read in it, لَا يَدْخُلُهُ الشَّيْطَانِ. Shaitan cannot enter it. So if you recite Suratul Baqarah in your home, shaitan will not be able to enter in your home. And Rasulullah he says, do not make your homes graveyard. Do not make your homes into a cemetery. Do not make your homes into a qabristan. Some people use this hadith as well as a similar hadith when Rasulullah was talking about salat. And he says, don't make your homes a graveyard. That you should pray some of your salat at home. Some would use that to say, you know what, we should pray, we should only come for Jummah, the masjid, and we should pray our other salat at home. What Rasulullah was talking about is your nafil and your sunnah salat. Pray your tahajjud salat at home. Pray some of your sunnah salat at home. But the first salat, make sure you come to the masjid to perform it. So you cannot use this hadith to say, Rasulullah says, don't make your homes a graveyard. I have to stay home and pray my salat. And only Jummah is a congregation prayer, then I come to the masjid for Jummah. No, all the 5 prayers are considered to be congregational prayers. So you have to come for the 5 prayers, but for example, some of your sunnah, you leave it off, and when you go home, you try to perform it. Sometimes you're with it. Sometimes you pray to the masjid, sometimes you go home and you perform it. Your tahajjud salat, you pray there, so that you do not make your homes a graveyard. Next, if you see that the hadith, Rasulullah is saying, don't make your homes a graveyard, then he's talking about reciting Surah Al-Baqarah. Does it mean that that we cannot recite Quran in a graveyard? That he's saying that you should recite Quran in your homes, recite Surah Al-Baqarah in your homes, and do not be like the graveyard. As we all know, we normally recite Quran in the graveyard. According to us, according to the Hanafi, it is allowed to recite Surah Al-Yasin and certain surahs at the graveyard. But what Rasulullah says, do not make your homes a graveyard. He was actually saying that in the graveyard, the deceased cannot pick up a Quran and read. In the graveyard, the deceased are in their graves, they cannot pick up a Quran and read for themselves. So do not make your homes look like a graveyard. Like if all the inhabitants of the homes are like deceased, they cannot pick up a Quran and read for themselves. So that is what Rasulullah is saying. Do not make it look like that, as if everybody is dead in the home. Nobody can pick up a Quran and read it. We should always take our Qurans from home, sit in our homes and recite some Quran as well. And as long as we recite Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, La yadkhuluhu shaitan. Shaitan cannot enter our home. Another hadith from Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Inna shaitana yakhruju min al-bayti idha samiya Suratul Baqarah takru fi. Verily shaitan flees from the home whenever he hears Surah Al-Baqarah is being recited in it. Shaitan flees from a home whenever he hears Surah Al-Baqarah is being recited in that home. Sometimes there's evil in somebody's home. Sometimes you move into a place and the place was locked up for a period of time. Sometimes 1 month, 2 months it was locked up. Nobody was living in that place. After a time you'll see evil jinn will start to occupy that place. So when an individual moves into that place now, sometimes there still remains some evil jinnat, some evil spirits. People say spirits in the place. Spirits, some evil jinnat. Now this surah, one of the speciality of this surah is to remove those spirits from your home, to clean your home. Now it is mentioned that when you move into a place or you now build your home, one of the things that you should do is recite Surah Al-Baqarah in your home. And what you normally do, the Surah Al-Baqarah consists of 40 ruku, 40. consists of 40 rukus, and you have 4 corners of your home. So you sit at one corner on the right side of the home and you recite the first 10 rukus of Surah Baqarah. Then you go to the back, one at the side, you recite the next 10 rukus, that is 20 rukus. Next side, the next corner of the home, another 10 rukus, and the last front corner, another 10 rukus. So like that, you're able to recite Surah Al-Baqarah on the 4 corners of your home, and whatever evil was remaining in your home, they will run away, they will flee from your home. And that is what Rasulullah is saying here, that shaitan flees from a home whenever he hears Surah Al-Baqarah is being recited in it. Another hadith from Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that Rasulullah says, La ulfayanna ahdukum yadu ihda rijlayhi ala al-ukhra yataghanna. Says, I should not find one of you sitting, placing one foot on the other and singing. So, for example, you're sitting in a position and you have one foot on the other and you're shaking and you're singing a song, singing a qasida or something. Now that qasida wrong, qasida is something it's allowed to do, you could sing. But he's saying for a person to just be singing whole day, all the time, as soon as he gets a free time, he's singing, but wayada Surah Al-Baqarah, and he's leaving out Surah Al-Baqarah. Not one day he says to himself, I have all this time, I'm singing all the time, let me open the Quran and recite Surah Al-Baqarah. He says, I should not see one of you doing that. If you get a little free time, you recite Surah Al-Baqarah. Recite Surah Al-Baqarah. And you get some more free time, you can still sing a little qasida. There's no problem to sing a small qasida. But you should not waste your time on only singing qasida and you leave out Surah Al-Baqarah. Then he says, فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانِ يَفِرُّ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي تَقْرُ فِيهِ سُورَةُ الْبَقَرَةِ. As same as the hadith before, that shaitan runs, flees from the house which Surah Al-Baqarah has been recited in it. Another hadith from Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he says, مَا مِنْ بَيْتٍ تَقْرُ فِيهِ سُورَةُ الْبَقَرَةِ. There's no home that Surah Al-Baqarah has been read inside, إِلَّا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ شَيْطَانٌ وَلَهُ ضَرَاتٌ. Except that shaitan comes out from it, وَلَهُ ضَرَاتٌ, and he passes wind. He passes wind. The reason for that is that as soon as shaitan hears you started to recite Surah Al-Baqarah, he tries to run, tries to flee, and with that kind of anxiety, he starts to pass wind whilst he's trying to escape from that home, because he cannot stay in a home upon which Surah Al-Baqarah has been recited. Then Rasulullah he says, إِنِّ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ sanam. Probably everything has a sanam, has a peak. وَإِنَّ sanam al-Quran Surah Al-Baqarah. And probably the highest peak of the Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah. And he says, وَإِنِّ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ لُبَابًا. Says everything has a lubab. Everything has a gist. Everything has the best part. Everything has a prime. Even mankind has the prime of your youth. Every single thing has a prime, or everything has a gist or a summary. And he says the lubab al-Quran, the gist of the Quran is the mufassal, which are a small surahs. From the last 5 paras going on, that is known as the mufassal. Says that is the gist of the Quran. That last 5 para concise or summarize everything that was in all those big surahs. So that is why those are known as the lubab. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, again he says, Man qara 10 ayat min Surah Al-Baqarah. Whoever recites 10 ayats from Surah Al-Baqarah fi laylatin, in a night, lam yadkhul dhalika al-baytu shaitan tilka al-layla. Then shaitan will not be able to enter that house in that night. Now the whole Surah Baqarah now, he's just mentioning 10 ayats of Surah Baqarah. So the hadith before was talking about the whole Surah Baqarah. Now Rasulullah has break it down, and I said whoever recites only 10 ayats of Surah Baqarah in that night, then shaitan will not be able to enter that home for that night. He says those 10 ayats are Arba'u min awwaliha, the first 4 ayats from the beginning of Surah Baqarah, the first 4 ayats, which is Alif Lam Mim, the first ayat, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, which is the second ayat, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, which is the third ayat, and the fourth ayat, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. That is the first 4 ayats. He says those 10 ayats, the first 4 is the first 4 of Surah Baqarah, then the Ayatul Kursi. which is 5 ayats. So 4 and Ayatul Kursi makes it 5. And then he says the 2 ayats after Ayatul Kursi. The 2 ayats. Many times when you hear about the virtues of Ayatul Kursi, the 2 ayats after Ayatul Kursi are very important as well. The 2 ayats are لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. That is the first ayat after Ayatul Kursi. Then the second ayat after Ayatul Kursi, Allah ولي الذين آمنوا يخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور والذين كفروا أولياؤهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. So these are the 2 ayats after Ayatul Kursi. So what we have so far is the first 4 ayats from Surah Baqarah, Ayatul Kursi, which made 5, and the 2 ayats after Ayatul Kursi, which makes it 7 ayats. Then we have the last 3 ayats of Suratul Baqarah, which is Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard, until the ending of Surah Baqarah. We have last 3 ayats. So he says, whoever recite these 10 ayats in that night, shaitan will not be able to enter in that home that night. In another narration is mentioned, وَلَا يُقَرِّبُهُ, shaitan will not be able to come close to him, وَلَا أَهْلُهُ, and neither close to his family. So by you reciting this 10 ayats of Surah Al-Baqarah, you're protecting your own self because shaitan will not be able to come close to you. As well, you're also protecting your family members who are at home. They didn't recite it, but they are getting protection because of you reciting these 10 ayats in the night. Then he says, وَلَا شَيْءٌ يَقْرَأُهُ, there will be nothing that he dislikes will touch him. Nothing displeasing to him will affect him. And then he mentions, وَلَا يَقَرَّأْنَا عَلَى مَجْنُونٍ إِلَّا أَفَاقٍ. And anytime this surah is being recited, which is Surah Al-Baqarah, is being recited on somebody who has become unconscious, then it says that afaqa, that he will regain his consciousness as long as he recites this surah over somebody who has become unconscious. Another hadith from Sahal bin Sa'd radiallahu ta'ala anhu, narrates that Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Inna li kulli shayin sanaman wa inna sanam al-Quran al-Baqarah, which we mentioned already. Then he says, وَإِنَّ مَنْ قَرَأَهَا فِي بَيْتِ لَيْلَةٍ لَمْ يَذْكِرُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ ثَلَاثَ لَيَالٍ. Says, whoever recites Surah Al-Baqarah in one night, whoever recites Surah Al-Baqarah in his home one night, then shaitan will not be able to enter his home for 3 nights. So you're protecting your home for 3 nights. You read it one night, then for 3 nights straight, your home is protected from shaitan. Then he says, وَمَنْ قَرَأَ فِي بَيْتِ نَهَارًا, whoever recites Surah Al-Baqarah in the day, then lam yadkulu shaitanu salasatu ayyam. For 3 days, shaitan will not be able to enter into your home. So by reading it one time, you're protecting your home for 3 days, or 3 nights. Another hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ba'athan, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sent out a delegation, sent out a troop for war. And when he had them organized, وَهُمْ ذُو عَدَدٍ, there were a lot of them. There were plenty warriors he was going to send out. But he didn't choose who was going to be the Amir as yet. He didn't make up his mind who will be the Amir. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did فَاسْتَقَرَّهُمْ فَاسْتَقَرَّ كُلُّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَا مَعَهُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. He started to ask each one, how much Quran do you know? Ask everyone from who is going to stand out, how much Quran you know, how much surahs you know. And he started to ask each one. Then فَأَتَى عَلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْ أَحْدَثِهِمْ سِنًا, he reached one of the youngest warriors, and he reached to him and he asked him, how much surah do you know? And this boy, being the youngest, he says, مَعِي كَذَا وَكَذَا وَسُورَةُ الْبَقَرَةِ. I know such and such surah, and I also know Surah Al-Baqarah. So when Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam heard that he has memorized Surah Al-Baqarah, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked him, قَالَ أَمَّعَكَ Surah Al-Baqarah. Do you really know Surah Al-Baqarah? Did you really memorize Surah Al-Baqarah? And the youngster, he says, Na'am, yes, I have memorized Surah Al-Baqarah. And Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, إِذْهَبْ فَأَنْتَ أَمِيرُهُمْ. إِذْهَبْ فَأَنْتَ أَمِيرُهُمْ. Go, you are the Amir. You are the Amir because you have memorized Surah Al-Baqarah. And he was the youngest. There were many elders elders who was in war before, was in battles before, who had more experience than him. But because of the Surah Baqarah, Rasulullah made him the Amir and the leader. Because Suratul Baqarah is able to guide somebody because of the amount of rules and regulations in Suratul Baqarah. Rasulullah chose him. But some of the elders, they didn't like that. To know that they were experienced. They went to battle many times. They went and they fought and they were successful in different battles. Now all of a sudden this youngster, he's now coming up and he become our leader. So one of them, they came to Rasulullah, one man, min ashrafi, and from their chiefs and their leaders. They came to Rasulullah and says, Wallahi, ma mana'ani an ata'allama Suratul Baqarah. The only reason, he says, I swear by Allah, the only reason I did not learn Suratul Baqarah. He's telling Rasulullah now, the reason I didn't learn Surah Baqarah, because it was easy to learn, I could have learned it just like this youngster. But the only reason I did not learn Suratul Baqarah is because inni khashitu an la aqumu biha. That I fear that I might not be able to practice all the laws of Suratul Baqarah. Right? Sometimes you make this excuse, I might be able to practice everything I learned, so I'll just learn how much I could practice, I'll just memorize how much I could practice. So he's saying this is the only reason I didn't learn Surah Al-Baqarah, because I fear that it is so long, 286 ayahs, there's so many laws in it, sometimes I might not be able to practice it, so I have just put that off and learned other surahs. Rasulullah said to him, Ta'allamul Quran wa qra'uhu. He says, learn the Quran and recite it. Learn the Quran and recite it. فَإِنَّ مِثْلَ الْقُرْآنِ لِمَنْ تَعَلَّمَهُ. The likeness of the Quran, of that one who learns the Quran, فَقَرَأَ, he recites it, وَقَامَ بِهِ, and he practices it. So he learns, recites, and practices what he has learned from the Quran. It says, كَمَثْلِ جَرَابٍ مَحْشُوٍ مِسْكًا يَفُوهُ رِيحُهُ فِي كُلِّ مَكَانٍ. It's a likeness of a bag that is filled with musk. Likeness of a bag that is filled with musk, and the mouth of that bag is open, and all that musk is just spreading in the air. So all over the scent, the sweet scent is spreading all over the place. That is like a person who memorizes the Quran, recites the Quran, and practices the Quran. That is their example. Then he says, the example of that one who learns the Quran. He learns the Quran for yarkud, but he's lazy. He only sleeps. He does not recite it. He does not act upon it. But it is jawfi. It is still in his memory. He still remembers it. It is the example of that one who just memorized it, but he just kept it and he did not read it. He did not practice on it. It's like kamatli jarabin. It's like a bag auka alamis, a bag which is full with musk because he has the Quran with him, but the mouth of that bag is tied. The mouth of the bag is tied, so no fresh scent can come out. Everything is remaining in him. So Rasulullah is teaching us, you can still memorize it. Never know when you start to recite it, when you start to practice it, but still memorize it because that sweetness is still remain in you. Another hadith from Usaid bin Hudayr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Usaid bin Hudayr, he says, بينما هو يقرأ من الليل سورة البقرة. He says, one night I was reciting Surah Al-Baqarah. And while I was reciting Surah Al-Baqarah, my horse was marsutatun. It was tied next to me. So my horse was tied next to me and I was reciting Surah Al-Baqarah. He says, every time I recite, Jalat al-Fars, the horse started to make movement, started to jump up. And for every time I stopped and became silent, the horse was quiet. The horse stopped making that movement. Says, for the second time I started to recite again, and as soon as I started to recite, the horse started to make movement, started to jump. So when I stopped reciting, I became quiet, the horse became quiet and became still. And the third time this happened, and he said after the third time, he saw next to the horse was his son. His son was next to the horse, which was Yahya. He says, I feared that the horse might trample over him. So I stopped reading Surah Baqarah and I went to collect my son. While lifting my son, taking my son with me, I looked at the sky and I saw something very strange. Something very strange. So I went to Rasulullah in the morning. I went to Rasulullah in the morning and narrated this to him. And Rasulullah he says, Ya Hudayr, Iqra, Ya Ibn Hudayr, you should have continued to read. You should have continued to read. And then he said to Rasulullah, I feared an tata'u Yahya, I feared that Yahya might have been trampled on. I feared that the horse might let loose and start to trample over Yahya. He says, when I raised my head, when I picked up my son and I raised my head, I saw the clouds, the radiant clouds was shining so much as if they were lamps in the sky. I saw those like lamps in the sky. Then Rasulullah says, وَصَدْرِ مَا ذَاكَ, do you know what was that? Do you know that light which you had seen in the sky? What was that? He says, no. And Rasulullah he says, تِلْكَ الْمَلَائِكَ, those were angels. Says those were angels. You're reciting Surah Baqarah, and the animal was making those movements because the animals were seeing the angels also. Says those were angels, danat li sautika. They were coming close to listen to your voice. They were coming closer and closer to listen to you recite Surah Al-Baqarah. Then he says, وَلَوْ قَرَأْتَ, if you have continued to read till the morning, يَنْظُرُ النَّاسُ إِلَيْهَا, even the people would have been able to see the angels. If you had continued to read till the morning, even the people would have been able to see the angels. لَا تَتَوَارَ مِنْهُمْ, the angels would not have been able to hide from them. So by reciting Surah Al-Baqarah, you even bring close to us the angels trying to listen to our recitation of Surah Al-Baqarah. And another narration is mentioned that it was said to Rasulullah, some of the Sahabas came and he says, Ya Rasulullah, Alam tara Thabit bin Qais, haven't you seen Thabit bin Qais, another Sahabi? Haven't you seen his home? His home is always lit. His home is always looking shine and bright. Rasulullah says, فَلَعَلَّهُ قَرَأَ Surah Al-Baqarah. Perhaps he must be reciting Surah Al-Baqarah. Without Rasulullah even looking at his home, Rasulullah says, perhaps he must have been reciting Surah Al-Baqarah. So these people, they went to Thabit and they asked him if he used to recite Surah Al-Baqarah, and Thabit, and he says, yes, every single day I recite Surah Al-Baqarah. That is why his house was always glowing. Another hadith from Abdullah bin Buraida, from his father, said, I was sitting with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As I was sitting with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Ta'allamu Surat Al-Baqarah, you should learn Surat Al-Baqarah. You should learn Surat Al-Baqarah. فَإِنَّ أَخْذَهَا barakah. Well, whoever takes Surah Baqarah, he has taken blessings, barakah. By learning and memorizing Surah Baqarah, you have taken blessings and barakah. He says, وَتَرَكَهَا حَصْرًا, and whoever leave out Surah Baqarah, and these blessings are because Surah Baqarah is the longest. Because Surah Baqarah is the longest, because a lot of people, they prefer to memorize all the other surahs and leave out Surah Al-Baqarah, because as soon as they see the size of Surah Baqarah, they prefer to go to smaller surahs. So that's why Rasulullah is saying, if you make that effort and learn Surah Al-Baqarah, you have gained barakah. And if you leave it out, fearing that it is too long, then it is hasra, it is sorrow, it is a grief. You have leave out something like that. Then he says, وَلَا تَسْتَطِيعُهَا بَطَلًا, and somebody that practices magic will never be able to recite will never be able to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah. Because one of the specialities of Surah Al-Baqarah also is to protect against the evil spirits and witchcraft. So somebody who is doing witchcraft, they will not be able to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah, because they'll be memorizing something that removes witchcraft. He says, Rasulullah became quiet for a little while, and then he said, Ta'allamu Surah Al-Baqarah wa Ali Imran. He says, learn Surah Baqarah as well as Surah Ali Imran. This is the second and the third surah of the Quran, two long surahs. He says, فَإِنَّهَا زَهْرَوَانِ. These two surahs are known as the two lights. The two surahs, Zahrawani, means the two lights. He says, verily these two surahs are two lights. يُذَلَّانِ صَاحِبُهُمَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And these two surahs will shade its companion on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So when we go on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the sun is right above our head. Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran will be able to shade us from that kind of sun. Then he says, كَأَنَّهُمَا غَمَامَتَانِ. These two surahs will be as if they are two clouds above our head. أَوْ غَيَايَتَانِ. or there'll be like two shades. There'll be like two roofs above our head, blocking us from all the heat. Then he says, "O firqani min tayrin sawaf," or there'll be like two lines of board just above our heads flying, shading us from the sun. Then he says, وَإِنَّ الْقُرْآنِ يُلَقَّى صَاحِبُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ حِينَ يُنْشَقُّ عَنْهُ قَبْرُهُ. He says, the Quran will meet its reader. The Quran will meet his companion on Yawm al-Qiyamah. At that time, he comes out from his grave. The time when he is resurrected and he comes out from the grave, the Quran will go and meet him. And when the Quran meets him, the Quran will be كَالرَّجُلِ الشَّاهِبِ, will be like a pale-faced man. A man who is pale-faced. It will come, this Quran will come in the form of a man. And the Quran will ask its reciter, he will say, هَلْ تَعْرِفُنِي, do you recognize me? The individual says, La, I do not recognize you. Who are you? And then he will say, أَنَا صَاحِبُكَ الْقُرْآنِ, I am your companion, the Quran. I am your companion, the Quran, whom you used to recite. He will say, الَّذِي أَطْمَعْتُكَ فِي الْحَوَاجِرِ, I am that one who used to keep you thirsty, was in the heat because you are reciting me. You are thirsty in that heat. وَأَسْحَرْتَ لَيْلَكَ, and I was that one who kept you in the night, awake because you are reciting me in the night. Then he says, وَإِنَّ كُلٌّ تَاجِرٌ مِنْ وَرَاءِ تُجَارَةٌ. Says every merchant has bring his merchandise today. Every merchant has bring his merchandise today. And today your merchandise is me, the Quran. Today your merchandise is me, the Quran. Then he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, kingship will be given. Kingship will be given on his right side, and eternal life will be given in his left hand, and on his head will be placed a crown. Allah will place a crown on his head. That is the person that used to recite the Quran. And even his parents, his mother and his father will be given to wear a pair of suits, which no person on the earth has ever worn before. Such splendid suit that no one in the world has ever worn before. And the parents will say, why were we given this to wear? They'll be asking, why were we given this nice, beautiful suit to wear? And then it will be said to them, because you ensure that your child learn to read the Quran. You ensure that your child learn to read the Quran, and they are always reciting the Quran. Then it will be said to the companion of the Quran, Iqra, recite. And while he's reciting, he's being elevated. Each ayah that he recites, he will be raising. And he recites until that which he knows. Up to how much you have memorized, that is where you are reached. When you reach to that degree where you cannot read again, where they have no more ayahs or you do not know any more ayahs, that will be a station in paradise. And it says, be it if you recite it slow, tartilan. Even if you used to recite it slow, or if you recite it speed, you'll still get the same blessing. You'll still be reciting it and you'll still be raising it, however how much Quran you'll be reading. Another hadith similar to that hadith that we did, it says, Iqra al-Quran فَإِنُّ شَافِئٌ لِأَهْلِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Recite the Quran, for verily it will be a shafi', it will be an intercessor for you on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then it says, Yuhajjani, Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran, both will dispute. Those will dispute on your behalf on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran. Another hadith, it is mentioned, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, the Quran will be given on Yawm al-Qiyamah to those who used to practice it. And Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran will be leading him towards paradise. Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran will be leading him towards paradise. It was mentioned that one man who was reciting Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran, both surahs in his salat, two very long surahs. If reciting it out of salat, it's close. If you can't read speed, like 3 hours to Surah Baqarah alone. If you could read speed, then you might clock it in an hour. But they saw one surah and he had recited 2 surahs, Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran in his salat. When he finished, Ubay bin Ka'b, who was appointed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as who was appointed by one of the Sahabi to lead the Tarawih Salah, Ubay bin Ka'b. He says, did you recite Suratul Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran in your Salat? The man said, yes. He Then he says, I swear by Allah that verily in Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran there are the names of Allah which whenever you ask Allah for anything, Allah will grant you. By reciting these two surah, anything you ask for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant it to you. It is also mentioned that whoever recites Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran in the day, he will be free from nifaq. Whoever recites these two surahs in the day, he will be free from hypocrisy until the evening. And whoever recites it in the night will be free from hypocrisy until the morning. And Umar bin Al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, whoever recites Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran, he'll be written amongst those who are obedient. He'll be written amongst the qaniteen. And it's mentioned that Rasulullah, mentioned from in Sahih al-Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, that Rasulullah read both of these surahs in one rakat. He read both surahs, Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran in one rakat, one standing. He said all two surahs. So this was the Rasulullah. And Suratul Baqarah is one of the Sabot Tiwal. The Quran is divided into four sections. You have the Tiwal, you have the Mi'in, you have the Al-Masani, and you have the Mufassal. Quran divided in those four sections. The Tiwal are known as the Sabot Tiwal, which is from among Surat Al-Baqarah, the 7 most longest surahs in the Quran. As we call it, Sabot Tiwal. And after the Sabot Tiwal, the next set of surahs are known as the Mi'in. Mi'in means those surahs that have approximately 100 ayat or a little more than 100 ayat. So after these 7 surahs, the remaining surahs that have 100 or more than 100 are known as the Mi'in surahs. Then after the Mi'in, you have the Masani. Masani are those surahs that have less than 100 ayats in it. And after the Masani, you have Al-Mufassal. Mufassal, which are the very short surahs. Mufassal starts from Surah Hujurat, the last 5 paras from Surah Hujurat until Surah An-Nas. So Surah Al-Baqarah is known as one of the Sabot Tiwal. And Rasulullah has mentioned that I was given the Sabot Tiwal in place of the Torah. The 7 surahs which include Surah Baqarah, Surah Imran, Surah Nisa, Surah Ma'idah, after Surah Ma'idah, Surah An'am, Surah A'raf, which is 6. And some of the scholars are of the opinion that Surah Al-Anfal and Surah Tawbah are considered to be one, because they have no Bismillah in Surah Tawbah. So Surah Al-Anfal and Surah Tawbah considered to be one. So the Sabot Tiwal would end at the end of Surah Tawbah. He says, I was given these 7 in place of the Torah. So Musa was given the Torah, I was given these 7 surahs in place of the Torah. Because the Torah was filled with commandments, and these 7 is filled with commandments as well. Then he says, وَأُتِيَتْ مِئِينَ, I was given the Mi'in, those surahs that have more than 100 ayats in place of the Injil. And then he says, I was given the Masani, those surahs that have a less than 100 ayats, I was given that in place of the Zabur. And then he says, I was given the Mufassal as a favor for me. The Mufassal was given as a favor for me. That was not given to no other prophet before, which is the last 5 paras of the Quran. And Rasulullah, he says, Man akhada sabfa wa habar. Whoever takes the first 7 surahs, whoever memorizes and learns the first 7 surahs, the long surahs, surely he will always be happy. He will always be rejoicing. Surah Al-Baqarah, most of Surah Al-Baqarah was revealed in Medina. That is why it is known as a Madani Surah. It was revealed in Medina. It was not revealed in Makkah. Without any difference of opinion, majority of the scholars say that majority of Surah Baqarah is Madaniyah. The beginning, when they entered into Medina, the first ayah to be revealed while they was in Medina was from Surah Al-Baqarah. So when they entered into Medina, the first set of revelation to be revealed to Rasulullah in Medina was from Surah Al-Baqarah. Then he says the last ayah to be revealed also is from Surah Al-Baqarah. The ayah which is وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Says that is the last ayah to be revealed, and that is from Surah Al-Baqarah. He says also the ayat of riba and interest was also revealed in Medina, and that is also in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Qalib Ma'dan, he says Surah Al-Baqarah is Suratul Quran. Surah Al-Baqarah is like the 10th of the Quran. Surah Al-Baqarah is like the tent of the Quran. That which is over the Quran, protecting the Quran, all the laws on top. Then he says, it is mentioned that Surah Al-Baqarah contains 1,000 new incidents. Surah Al-Baqarah contains 1,000 new incidents. It contains 1,000 new commands. Contains 1,000 commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it also contains 1,000 prohibitions. So 1,000 commands in Surah Baqarah, 1,000 prohibitions in Surah Baqarah, and 1,000 new events in Surah Al-Baqarah. Then he mentions about the amount of ayats in Surah Al-Baqarah, 286 ayats. The amount of words in Surah Al-Baqarah, 6,221 words in Surah Baqarah. And the amount of letters in Surah Baqarah, 25,500. That's the amount of letters in Surah Al-Baqarah. There's just one hadith from Abu Umama, a very strange narration, which we'll close it inshallah. Abu Umama said that some of the Sahabas, they were on this mountain path, on the cliff, and it was very rocky. It was very hard for them to climb past it to go over to the other side. It says, while on this cliff of this mountain, they saw two green trees at the top of the mountain. And whilst trying to go up onto this mountain, it was very hard because of how it was so rocky. It says, they said that the tree called out to them. The tree called out to them. And this was something, even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the trees used to talk. The tree called out to them and says, which one of you, is there any one of you that knows Suratul Baqarah? Is there any one of you that knows Surat Ali Imran? And one man, he raised his head and he announced loud, yes, I know Surah Baqarah as well as Surah Ali Imran. And the tree, it is mentioned that the tree started to lean its limbs towards them. And they were able to hold on the limbs and climb over the mountain. This is mentioned in Tafseer ibn Kathir. It's one of the strange stories that was mentioned about the Sahabas, in the life of the Sahabas radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And this was given to them because of learning Surah Al-Baqarah. That even the trees were able to be obedient to them because of Surah Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran. So these are some of the virtues and blessings of Surah Al-Baqarah. Next week, inshallah, we'll actually start the first ayat, Alif Lam Mim, and then we'll continue from